All right, everyone. We are getting ready for our first panel of the day, which is very exciting for me because this is all about LED. So, if you are an LED nerd, this is the panel for you. So, let's bring on Bryce McFeeters of Nanolumens and Brad Kerner of Megapixel. Hi, guys. How are you doing?
Hey, great to have. Thanks for having us.
Of course. Hi, Brad. How are you? Oh, I believe you're muted.
Sorry about that. Nice to be back again. Thank you, Steph.
Yeah, of course. So, first of all, I would love for if you would just both talk a little bit about yourselves and your careers. Bryce, do you want to start?
Sure, why not? Bryce McFeeters. I'm the Vice President of Product and Planning for Nanolumens. Started quite some time ago now in the interactive advertising space with LCD and projection, and then came over to Nanolumens where for the last 10 years, I've been working with them to develop the product line and, set us forward, see where we're going.
Amazing. And Brad?
I originally come from architecture and lighting and the early phases of the architectural LED lighting revolution. And then I moved into sort of special projects. And then for the past 2 years, I've been at Megapixel doing product marketing on micro LED displays.
So, literally, the two perfect people to have on this panel. So, I'm going to kind of start us off with like a large question. So, I'm interested to just kind of talk history a little bit. Like, what, in your opinions, were the biggest technological leaps that brought us from a space that was so dominated by projection? Like, back in the day, lamp-based projection to now we're seeing LED driven like changes really in spaces where projection only used to shine. So, whoever wants to kind of talk about that a little bit. Whoever wants to take it first.
I can jump in then. I used to do a lot with LCD and projection, and I would say I think, because I remember, oddly enough, when I was at my old company, Nanolumens, coming in and pitching me. So it was a fun, full circle experience. But at the time, the challenge was that one, LED was very, very expensive.
Yeah.
And two, the pixel pitch was so wide that for any sort of up close viewing, it was really, really challenging. And then I'd say right around, call it 2014, when 2.5 started becoming achievable. And even to now, right, I would just say in the last 5 years, we've seen a much larger acceptance, which has come with the tighter pitches starting to become a lot more affordable. Now, we're not in parity with LCD yet, but we are getting much, much closer. I would say we say it's within an arguable distance.
Yeah.
Right, of doing that. And of course, now there's all sorts of other evolutions that are coming in of power consumption and contrast and how bright and refresh rates and all those things. But to kind of overtake and what was the shifting point, I really feel like it's in that pitch and cost element.
Well, let me jump in about the kind of the application space that's really driving the demand for this, that there's been this long demand for sort of luminous surfaces, right? I mean, all the way back to stained glass and Gothic cathedrals, right? The desire to have a surface that's actually glowing, that's actually emitting the image or the light has been there forever, right? And it's a luminous surface is just different than an illuminance on a surface, right? And that's a sort of fundamental feeling of reality and vibrance that you get out of these surfaces. So the demand is kind of timeless and eternal. It's the technology that's just been desperately trying to catch up to sort of particularly the interior architectural scale, where you're an arm's length away from the surface, right? That's kind of the holy grail. We've gone from U2's Pop Mart tour and the original NASDAQ sign, which are these mega spectacles because they were so big and coarse, but they were so far away. Now you have to be intimate and like at your face. So.
Absolutely. Do you think that for both of you that cost has a lot of the reason to do with this? Because as a technology comes out, of course, when something is new, it's always very, very expensive. It's hard to replicate. But as we're seeing, especially like DV LED with the way that it's basically like hyper changing every year, we're starting to see the price come down. Do you see that kind of playing a big role as well?
So, I would say, at least from our side, right, the market's much like, much like a personal, gap, right? There's the bell curve of the market, right? There's always the guys that can spend the premium, be on the bleeding edge, and have absolutely incredible experiences, and dollars don't really matter as much. But the real scale of it, at the end of the day, dollars matter,
Yes.
right? And I think you'll see that. I think something that supports that is the bifurcation of these product lines you see from us and all of our competitors. It used to be A line used to have the premium guys and then the cheap guys, and now everybody has at least a premium and a lower cost, if not a multi-tier product strategy to go after all the different points. And like it or not, right, the bulk of that bell curve is in a cost conscious or a budget driven decision making process, right?
And it's the cost of the screen directly is obviously a big portion of it, but there's all sorts of secondary costs that when you're a real specifier trying to get this stuff on a construction project, those are a lot of like kind of hidden landmine sort of costs. All those technologies have dramatically dropped too, to make the media generation, the media serving, the moving data around. I mean, all those things, if you think 20 years ago, were an R&D project in and of themselves, plus the screen. So a lot of that's just become plug and play, very easy to spec, very easy to get on construction projects, at least compared to what it used to be.
I'm interested in kind of breaking down a few of the LED types because I feel like this has been explained to me a million times and it never sticks. So, could y'all kind of talk a little bit about mini LED versus micro LED versus traditional SMD, and like why these distinctions matter when it comes to like a real life install?
Yeah, sure. So it's probably kind of best to do it from a timeline perspective, right? Because it'll make a little bit of sense of the progression. So SMD is what we all know and love since the 20 millimeter days, and even down into 0.9, right? And even it's still relevant today. But basically it's what everybody thinks of when they think of an LED, the little square that's got the package, and you hear bonding where there's gold and copper, and that's where those pieces comes in. And one of the challenges of that is as we started to get into tighter and tighter pixel pitches, it became more and more fragile as you put them on the board. And of course, because you have all that packaging around the die, they can only get so close, which affects your contrast, affects a number of things, and it makes it ever more fragile as you're trying to put these things together, especially in our world of where you're trying to flex boards, right? So along came COB, which the idea of COB is, hey, let's take all those little diodes that are in that package, right? And maybe it take 1 second to explain that, right? Because the LED itself, that circle on top you see is actually not the LED. That's a encapsulation and a filler that sits on top of 3 little individual dies. COB, they take those 3 dies out of that package and mount them directly to the board. So what are your advantages there, right? One, you're not dealing with the package, so you can get these dies extremely close to each other. There's a lot more black or space between each of them, which is ultimately where your contrast is driven from. So that's why if you compare a COB to an SMD board, you'll immediately see SMD looks gray, COB looks black. But because those dies are now on the board, well, now you have to do that coding that everybody refers to. Everybody calls it a COB coding, but really COB refers to the boards being, or the chips being attached on the board, chip on board. And then there's a hard epoxy coating that goes over that provides the protection from the die, or for the die, right? Now, the advantages is you don't have this bonding where you can get dust and contamination and breakage and solder joints and all of that. You also get the contrast like we talked about. You get the space that you talked about. The challenges are, though, that now because I'm dealing with raw die, I can't do things like binning. So one of the real challenges that have hit the industry is you'll notice that COB requires calibration, generally speaking, and that's because of the binning is much wider and the consistency is much wider. And there's only so many people that could actually control that die and get super tight die. So it had a really challenging startup when it came to calibration and how do you tackle these things and the let's say the consistency of getting those. And so now where some of the confusion comes in with MicroLED and COB, right, is that so MicroLED's marketed a few ways. If you talk to the nerds, if you talk to our CIO, he's going to tell you the real reason that the real point of MicroLED is that, and mini LED is actually the very size of the chip. So, and I never remember the exact numbers, but if SMD is a certain size, mini LED is extremely small, and then micro LED is like 1/10 of the size of mini LED. And again, similar advantages, but the other thing about micro LED is that it can be put on glass, and those are some of the next substrates that people are looking at. A lot of old LCD technology driving those, like active matrix, but those are years and years out at this point. A lot of estimates put it at ready for real commercial use at scale in sometime in 2030 timeframe. But in between those is this MIP and what a lot of marketing of MicroLED is today, which is let's take the same MicroLED LEDs, put them in the SMD package, and now what do we gain? We gain the ability to bin like an SMD package, but we get a much smaller footprint, so we can do much narrow, much tighter pitches and maintain that contrast of COB. And now we have this new MIP MicroLED package. Now, it sounds like the perfect world, but a lot of it is still very expensive because of the substrates that are used in it. And so you get this balance of, and I get this all the time, like who's going to win, MIP or COB? And nobody quite knows yet. Right? It kind of feels like the HD Blu-ray battle, but simultaneously, I think both are going to have a unique fit. I think the market's going to make space for both. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, and just to add here for folks thinking about the end applications on the micro LEDs, mini LEDs, whatever you want to say, like I was quite shocked looking at this myself, where if you have a 0.8 millimeter pixel pitch, the dies, the RGB die is like 0.1, and then 0.6 between the dies is empty space. It's black. So that's what gives you that dramatic black that is so powerful, right? And a lot of people don't understand that's a very, very dramatic difference from packaged LEDs, where, like you said, you get gray because all of that space is basically filled with plastics and all the wire bonds and all the other stuff.
Absolutely. So kind of for both of you as well, as pixel density is kind of increasing, what are the biggest trade-offs right now between resolution, heat, and power efficiency?
So again, channeling our CIO for a moment, this is one of his favorite topics, right? Because so many people equate, they attach to one element, right? Of, is it common cathode? Is it common anode? Is it copper LED? Is it gold LED? Is it MIP? Is it COB? And the reality is no one item is driving efficiency. We've seen common anode designs that we've done exceed in efficiency common cathode designs, right? We've seen MIP be less efficient than COB, and we've seen COB be more efficient than MIP. So it really is a factor of multiple things, right? Getting into the weeds because this is a tech nerd conversation, right? One of the revelations is a lot of people think, if you go from a gold bonded LED to a copper LED, the efficiency goes down because of the copper and gold. But it's really driven by the fact that when you're buying a copper LED, they're using a slightly different die size to achieve a lower price point. And because that die size is different or less efficient, you're driving it harder. And that's what's really causing your power efficiency to go down, right? And you can offset this through different drivers types, how you drive that. You can offset that through running dual voltages on the board, so you're not wasting voltage on one of the legs. So it really comes into the design of the product. and the selection, as we kind of think about it, is you really have all these ingredients, and it's how are you mixing the ingredients to ultimately come out the other side, and what are your goals, right? And there's always that balance of performance to cost to what are you designing for, right?
Absolutely. Brad, I'm interested in, oh, go ahead if you have thoughts.
Well, just I've seen this since, let's say, 97, when really blue LEDs took off and you had the first RGB lighting in architectural lighting, that it's just, it is purely inevitable that the prices go down. You can gamble your life savings on that. It will go down eventually. And like, it goes down sometimes so rapidly that you need to think about having performance specs about what you expect it to be long into the future if your project's 4 or 5 years out or something like that. Like it is dramatic, the price difference. I was just thinking about this. So you all know the MR16 halogen bulbs you might have in your house or whatever. At Color Kinetics in 2005, we tried to make one of those. It was like hard to make it for like $45 per fixture. I just bought a 10 pack for like $6, right?
Yeah.
And that's 20 years of progress there for you. So it's inevitable that these LED products keep going down, and all the ancillary stuff with it accompanies it. So
I'm actually interested, Brad, also, if in your opinion on this, as displays get finer and brighter, what advances in like color reproduction and HDR handling and signal processing are making the real difference there?
yeah, that is so technically complex. It's even a bit beyond me, but I mean, things like bit depth and a lot of the refinements, let's say, in like grayscales, getting rid of those sort of splotchy digital artifacts when you're really in low light levels and you have like very subtle gradients, right? That can really instantly look bad and destroy the effects. A lot of that's sort of the processing horsepower in the chipsets behind the scenes, so that you can go up to like, it was just a megapixel is like 78 bits. I mean, it's insane how much extra data you can pump onto the screens, because all the processing from behind the scenes is so powerful now, right? And it's like the cumulative effect of all of those little changes is giving you this sort of dazzling sense of reality, right? I've been asking some of the real hardcore optical geeks that I know, I'm like, so is there a Turing test for screens coming up, like where it's going to be indistinguishable from reality at some point? And how many years away are we from that? And that gets a whole bunch of opinions when you try to really think that through. But practically speaking, already, if you set up a scenario where you had the average person looking at one of these screens and they didn't know how it was detailed or framed out, they would probably mistake it for a real window, right? So it's already there. It's just how pervasive that will be at what cost.
So Bryce, we talked about chip on board a little bit. Now I'm interested to have you talk about glue on board some too. And where does that method make sense? And like, what's the limitation with that?
So again, kind of that delineation of everybody relates chip on board to the coding.
Yeah.
Right. And you really have to think about a COB, right, is actually exactly what it's stating. It is that chip going on the board. The coating is actually not COB, right? It's just an epoxy coating. That's effectively what GOB is just in a similar epoxy coating, right? And we'll have different mixes for different applications for different reasons, but functionally, the hard coating on COB and the hard coating on GOB is the same thing, right? GOB was derived around SMD, right? Let's get a hard coating on there so LEDs can't get knocked off and physical damage, and actually protecting the board. So that was around really just, I'm not going to say before COB, but it was, let's say, mass production as COB was still getting figured out, right? So you can think of them as kind of the same thing, just are you running SMD or are you running COB? And how that kind of comes to market and how you plan around that is, what are your goals, right? Because COB right now, generally speaking, lives between 0.7 and 1.5. Some are starting to toy with 1.8, but the volume just isn't there. And so it seems like that knee point happens right around, both from a cost and performance gain perspective, seeing that crossover in that 1.2 to 1.5 range. So you still have SMD that's very relevant above that. But some people, you want to protect those boards. Like, we have some, theme park customers of ours that, they have huge walls. People are running, buggies into them, or kids are scratching at them and they're getting this damage, right? So that's the answer. Let's get that coating on there. So no damage can come to those LEDs.
Brad, I'm interested in kind of like taking a walk down like kind of application and design lane for a minute. How are you seeing design priorities kind of shifting between like corporate lobby, control room, live events? What are you seeing on the markets there?
Yeah, my focus has always been on architectural applications. So that's sort of everything from luxury residential to hospitality to retail to healthcare. And again, the desire has been there. If you look at the science fiction movies of 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, they've all shown these sort of magic walls that have, some sort of like digital portal to beyond, right? So again, desire is there from the visionaries. It's been a lot of architects and interior designers, though, have no experience with these. Sort of the post-dot-com bust, my theory is that a lot of the Gen X architects, nobody wanted to put screens and digital technologies in anything after the dot-com bust. So there's a generation of architects and interior designers that just didn't really deal with these. And they don't have the language and they don't know how to use it, right? So they might have seen it in a airport or something like that. Or they've seen it largely just as advertising, right? And they don't like that. And they have a hard time making the leap between this big wall is this garish thing from Times Square. It's going to become this beautiful architectural presence in my, 5-star luxury hotel lobby. So there's a big gap there. It is closing. You see the kind of always the peripheral. You've always had the installation artists. You had the music stuff. You had the folks who go from LDI into the architectural market and beyond, right? There's always been those special projects. It's just, how is that going to scale now into more volume applications? So you see this in more just average luxury hotels. Let's say just merely the 5-star, not the 7-star hotels.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And Bryce, okay, so we've talked about tighter pitches, we've talked about larger canvases. How are manufacturers like Nanolumens kind of ensuring this long-term consistency and brightness and color across all these different panels?
So a lot of that is just in material selections, right? There are different qualities of LED, right? At the end of the day, there are, and even in the gold and copper categories, right? Everybody hears those things and think that's category A and category B, but a lot of these manufacturers actually have tiers within that. There's a good, better, best of copper, a good, better, best of gold, right? And so a lot of that longevity is simply driven from quality components that are designed, right? And that goes into the actual design of the LED itself, the epoxies they're using and the fillers, right? The lead frames, how those are designed, right? And it really gets down into those, not even so far from the display, but literally the actual LED design. And so we spend a ton of time testing and looking at different LEDs and running boards. For every product we release, we probably ran 10 samples of different LEDs and things like that and put them through all sorts of environmental testing and things like that to see how they would perform when taxed, right? And so, the good news is if you step back to, 2012, right, there's a really stark difference. And you'll see that at places like Infocom. We talk about it all the time. I used to walk in Infocom and you could see very clearly high quality LED, low quality LED. And it was a very stark difference, but it becomes a lot more challenging today.
Yeah.
Right? Because technology is advanced and the separation between good and okay and bad is really hard to distinguish, right? So a lot of that, I think of it a lot like somebody told me once, it's like outdoor furniture. You could tell a lot by the warranty somebody's willing to put on it, right? If you go and they're like, oh, it's a 1-year warranty, and then you look over at something else and it's a 10-year warranty, that should tell you a lot about what the expectation is and what somebody's willing to put their money on the line and tell you what you'll get out of this thing, right?
That's absolutely fair. For both of you, this is kind of an interesting and fun question I thought I might ask. What is the most common myth about LED that you wish people would stop, like, perpetuating? I know that's a tough one, but I figured I would throw that out there
Hmm.
to see if either of you had a good answer.
Yeah, that's a very tough question, actually.
I don't get much about myths. I think the biggest, I would say the biggest battle we fight
Yeah.
with is more the marketing side of things, right? People hear marketed language and attach to it and don't, kind of like how you're talking about the micro LED and the C
Yeah.
and all that. We spend a lot of time educating on the differences thereof. And that's fine because we live it every day and these people don't. But it's really good when people have the, ask the question, right? Like, hey, I really don't understand this. And it becomes, it's difficult on the side of where it gets brushed to the side because it's like, no, I get it. It's gotta be this. It's gotta be this.
Yeah.
And some of our best customer bonds we've created is when they come in with an idea and we just go, hold on a second. What are you trying to accomplish? What are your goals? Right. And a lot of times it actually ends with us selling either lower cost or a smaller program to them than they thought that they needed, but ultimately they end up happier. And so it both works well for us, but it's also challenging, right? Because you don't always get that opportunity. You don't always get that partner or that client that takes a moment to go, hold on, let me understand what's going on here.
And just to riff on that application space again, like the end customers or the specifiers or the architects or who knows who you're dealing with may never have been to ISE or an Infocom and they've never seen the backside of one of these walls, and they're just a plane of video on the front, and they have no idea what's behind there.
Yeah.
I was literally at an art show with a big digital wall, and I was standing chatting with this artist, and at some point it dawned on me. She asked me this question. I'm like, well, but can we change the art on this wall? Like, it did not connect in her mind that this was just a big display. Right. So you have to understand there's a massive range of understanding and
Sure.
technical savvy that, like, you get very quickly in the industry, all this stuff so innately, you don't even think about how people really get scared or have no understanding of the basics of it.
No, that's absolutely fair. It's almost like it's not one myth. It's that people just lack an understanding when we step outside of the industry a little bit. I think that's fair. So, what do you each think the next big innovation in LED is going to be? Do you think it's going to have to do with chip architecture, control system, something else entirely, just that it's going to be really, really cheap one day?
I would kind of the trend that I've been seeing, right, is I always say the pixel pitch war is over, right? You have people going 0.6, 0.7,
Yeah.
0.4, right? But the reality is that once you get down that tight, there's, and it's not even really moving in volume yet because there's just not that one much dollars, but two like use cases for some of this stuff. But where you're really seeing the evolution is in the video performance side, right? How 8-bit, 10-bit, 12-bit. How good can we make these things look? How efficient can they run? And so if it continues on that trend, I think the next real, let's say, landmark shift of technology, I think will come likely with MicroLED, simply because there's a lot of the cost parity can really start getting down with LCD because the consumer side can pick up and really boost the volume. But two, behind what it's not so much the LED as much as what's coming behind it, and it's the active matrix driving. So if you look at the LED walls, right, and everybody can see the scan lines, if you move your eyes real quick or move your head real quick, right, it distracts, and there's something that happens with your eyes that just makes it a little uncomfortable, and that's because of how everything's driven. And that doesn't happen with LCD, right? And that has to do with how you're functionally driving the systems, active burst of Patrick matrix technology. With micro LED and chip on glass, it's run functionally like an LCD. In fact, a lot of the guys that are producing these things are LCD manufacturers because of the production lines to do it, right? So you can get these active matrix topologies and the advantage of the brightness, of the longevity, of all of those things that everybody preaches about LED. It's where the greatness of LCD marries with the greatness of LED, and you do away with the downsides of both. It's just a matter of when will that happen? Because you know, it started as 27, then we heard 28, and now it's looking a little bit more like 30. But that's my thought of where the next real significant shift will happen.
And to add on about like the form factor of this technology, right? All of those miniaturization things give you more and more options to different substrates. And again, going back 25 years when I did my master's thesis, we looked at these early 5mm LEDs, and I kind of made a laser cut sheet of clear flexible plastic. And I said, you know, look, you can make a grid of these LEDs. And I said, at some point, we're going to have this magical material that's like this perfect video surface that's flexible, conformal. You can cut it in any shape you want. You can apply it on any material surface. And that prediction has basically trended true. So we're at this point now where you can have video in any, you can have, you know, spheres of video, you know, compound curves of video right now. It's awkward, but that stuff keeps getting better and better. It's augmented by digital manufacturing. So when you get out of this mindset of like, it's like these rigid pre-made tiles, and you go more and more into like, it's a roll-to-roll process, or it's glass sheet, or it's, you know, these various architectural surface paradigms, you might move beyond, you might move into fabrics, you know, I mean, you don't know, right? Like I was just in Amsterdam here. There's a car showroom that has a massive, you know, glass wall with a sort of like, I don't know, 2 or 3 millimeter pixel pitch in it. To the average guest, it looks like it's this magic transparent screen from a distance, right? Very much just like out of Minority Report. So I think you will see a lot more creative form factors that both drive cost reduction in applying to architecture and also increase the creative space to it.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I believe that is about all the time we have. So the last thing I am going to ask each of you is to talk a little bit about where people can find you online if they'd like to connect with you after this, and where they can find your organization. So Bryce?
Sure. So nanolumens.com. All sorts of fun stuff on there, configurators you guys can play with. Me personally, you can find me on LinkedIn. Go to NanoLumen's site, add them as well, connect with them as well.
Amazing. Brad?
Yeah, for me, it's LinkedIn. That's the easiest way to find me. Company is megapixelvr.com. A lot of good information there. Our LEDs are ventanadesign.com too. So
amazing. Well, thank you both so much for your time, and thanks for being part of Launch Week 12.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.